Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading today from the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, chapter 18, titled Parikshit Cursed by a Brahmin Boy. Today we're taking a look at text number 21. Atapi yat padana kava srishtam. Atapi yat padana kava srishtam. Jagat virincho paritarhanam bha. Jagat virincho paritarhanam bha. Sesham punatyanyatamo mukunda.
Shesham punati anyatam mukunda.
Shesham punatyanyatamo mukunda.
Shesham punati anyatamo mukunda.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha.
Atapi yatpadanakavasrishtam.
Atapi yatpadakavasrishtam.
Jagatvirincho paritarhanambaha.
Jagatvirincha paritarhanambaha.
Sesham punatyanyatamo mukunda.
Shesham punati anyatamo mukunda.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha. Deafening voice. Atapi yatpadanakavasrishtam. Jagatvirincho paritarhanambaha.
Shesham punati anyatamo mukundat.
Sesham punatyanyatamo mukundat.
Yo namaloke bhagavat padartaha.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha.
Atapi yatpadanakavasrishtam.
Atapi yatpadanakavasrishtam.
Jagat virincha paritarhanamba.
Jagatvirincho paritarhanambaha.
Shesham punati anyatamo mukundat.
Sesham punatyanyatamo mukundat.
O namaloke bhagavat padartha.
Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha. Ladies. Atapi yatpadanakavasrishtam. Jagatvirincho paritarhanambaha. Sesham punatyanyatamo mukundat. Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha. Atapi yatpadanakavasrishtam. Jagatvirincho paritarhanambaha. Sesham punatyanyatamo mukundat. Konamaloke bhagavat padartaha. Ata. Therefore, api, certainly, yad, whose, padanaka, nails of the feet, avasrishtam, emanating, jagad, the whole universe, virincha, brahmaji, uparita, collected, arhana, worship, amba, water, sa, along with, isham, Lord Shiva, punati, purifies, anyatama, who else, mukunda, besides the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, ka, who, nama, name, loke, within the world, Bhagavat, Supreme Lord, pada, position, artha, worth. Translation. Who can be worthy of the name of the Supreme Lord but the personality of God, Shri Krishna? Brahmaji collected the water emanating from the nails of his feet in order to award it to Lord Shiva as a worshipful welcome. This very water, the Ganges, is purifying the whole universe, including Lord Shiva. Purport. The conception of many gods in the Vedic literatures by the ignorant is completely wrong. The Lord is one without a second, but he expands himself in many ways, and this is confirmed in the Vedas. Such expansions of the Lord are limitless, but some of them are the living entities. The living entities are not as powerful as the Lord's plenary expansions, and therefore there are two different types of expansions. Lord Brahma is generally one of the living entities, and Lord Shiva is the via medium between the Lord and the living entities. In other words, even demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, who are the chief amongst all demigods, are never equal to or greater than Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, and all-powerful demigods like Brahma and Shiva are engaged in the worship of Vishnu or Lord Krishna. Therefore, who can be more powerful than Mukunda, to be factually called the Supreme Personality of Godhead? The goddess of fortune, Lakshmiji, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are not independently powerful. They are powerful as expansions of the Supreme Lord, and all of them are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, and so also are the living entities. There are 4 sects of worshipful devotees of the Lord, and the chief amongst them are the Brahma Sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya, and Shri Sampradaya, descending directly from Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, respectively. Besides the above-mentioned 3 Sampradayas, there is the Kumara Sampradaya, descending from Sanat Kumara. All of the 4 original Sampradayas are still scrupulously engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord up to date, and they all declare that Lord Krishna, Mukunda, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no other personality is equal to him or greater than him. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagna Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishware Vrishabhano Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasari Ghora Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Who can be worthy of the name of the Supreme Lord but the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna? Brahmaji collected the water emanating from the nails of his feet in order to award it to Lord Shiva as a worshipful welcome. This very water, the Ganges, is purifying the whole universe, including Lord Shiva. The conception of many gods in the Vedic literatures by the ignorant is completely wrong. It is a very important part of our Sampradaya, the Vaishnava Sampradayas, and the approach to the Vedic literatures to understand that ultimately it is actually still monotheistic. There is actually only one God. It's very revolutionary because most people actually in India won't necessarily agree like that. But it is bewildering. Krishna's superiority as the primary person and as the one controller of everything, it's very difficult to understand because there is all these other personalities, all these other expansions. And but we see it is very important, very, very important to understand that ultimately there is one person that is in control, there is one God. Because, well, practically we see that until we come to the point of understanding that there is one supreme controller and that surrender unto him is the goal of life, then it will be very difficult for us to be very fixed in goal. One can worship the demigods and be very pious, But one will not be able to overcome material desire. That is not possible. Because as long as one is still thinking there are many desires in the world, then surrender is difficult. Surrender already is very difficult, even if you are completely convinced that there is only Krishna and only his desire is most important. But Krishna explains in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita how, in the beginning of the 4th chapter, very nicely explains how his unique position has to be understood. That Arjuna asked him in the beginning of the 4th chapter, Krishna says that I have taught previously this science that I'm explaining to you. I have taught it also to the sun god, Vilāsa. And Arjuna says, but how is that possible? Like, I know you. You're my cousin. You're a little bit older than I am. How exactly does this work? So Krishna says, well, there's a difference between you and I. Ajopi san avyayatma. Even though I am standing here before you in this body, but this body is actually eternal. This form that I have. It's not like your body. This body is my eternal form. And it is this body does not deteriorate. This form that I have. This form is eternal. And I can remember all my previous appearances. I appear again and again within this world. But the difference between you and me is that I remember everything, and you don't. Because I'm not changing my body. I have the same form, and in this form I am moving. So therefore Krishna's appearance is even though he comes in many forms and many times, but it's the same person. It's only one person. All the Vishnu avatars, all these incarnations of the Lord, it's ultimately the same person that is expanding in all these forms. And ultimately there's one will, one desire guiding everything. That is important to understand, because we are ultimately forced to surrender. The living being has to surrender to some kind of a desire. Either his own desire, which means the desire of the mind and the senses, or the desires of someone else. You will look for some relationship in this world and then try to fulfill that person's desires. So we all ultimately will surrender to something. But it is only if one can understand that there is this special person above everything. There's this special desire. That ultimately the whole reality is resting on that desire, the desire of Krishna. And if one can somehow or other connect with that desire, it's explained that Krishna, he has the unique Shakti, the Ichcha Shakti, the desiring Shakti, which means that of all living beings, what makes him unique, even amongst all the various Vishnu avatars and all the forms, all the expansions that he has, ultimately his desire, he has the supreme desire. Whatever he wants, and you see it sometimes, when there is conflict in this world, you see that two living beings, they come together. And one living being wants one thing, and the other living being wants something else. And then there's a tussle. Then we will see who will win. And then there's many ways. Sometimes it becomes physical, so you see who is the strongest, or other times you see who can manipulate the situation the most. Or oftentimes it means who has the most powerful friends, who has the most influence of powerful people. Or sometimes you can, so in many ways people try to get their will, get their way. But Krishna is unique. He doesn't have to compete with anyone. His will is his will is the most powerful. And in fact, it is only by his will that we exist. So therefore, it makes sense to surrender to Krishna's will, because it is very powerful. And at the same time, it also comes from our understanding. He can see everything. You see, he's the one that is aware of everything. His will, his decisions that he makes, his desires, it is not limited. It is not short-sighted. He sees the big picture because he sees everything. So Krishna then tells Arjuna that in the past, many people, because they have understood this fact about me, that I am unique, therefore they have acted in full knowledge of this, and therefore they have become completely purified. So it is important because we see that the willpower or the determination, it is very interesting because it can sometimes be very strong, but also sometimes very weak, even in the same people. And the thing that makes the willpower very weak is if there is too many alternatives. If one has many alternatives, it becomes difficult to stay fixed on one course of action. It's very difficult to do one thing. If there's no alternative, then we see a lot of energy is released. Therefore you see, for example, even average people, if they have to fight for their life, they can do the most amazing things. The average, someone who just looks, and generally he might be very timid and not very courageous, weak-minded, difficult to focus, all these things, but you put him in a situation where he has to fight for his life, then amazing how much energy comes out. I once saw this video of a mountain climber. He was doing free climbing, so without any ropes, and he climbed this rock face, and then somehow what happened is he pulled, and then a whole chunk of rock came out, like a massive boulder, like a piece of the wall, basically, like a massive rock wall. It fell. It broke off while he was clinging onto it, and he fell onto his back with this big rock on his, and he stopped it. Boom. So he was lying like this on his back, and there was a slope, and he was starting to go backwards, so towards the cliff edge, and he had this thing on his chest, and he didn't know what to do, and it was very heavy, like I don't know how many pounds, but very, very heavy. And what he did then, he saw the only way he would do is he had to push this whole thing off him, this big rock, he had to push it off him. And he pushed so hard, because he knew that now it's like, either he does this or he dies, there's no other alternative. And he pushed so hard that he pushed that thing off him. But he pushed so hard that the muscles in his chest and his arms, it ripped, it like broke, because your muscles are all connected to bone, you know. So your muscles connected to bone, and he pushed, he generated so much force, you know, that he tore the muscles straight from his bones. But he lived, he survived. But it was amazing to see how that person would never, if you had to put him in the gym, and you put that amount of weight, and you asked him to push it up, never be able to. I mean, how can you, it's not possible to generate that much force for a human being. But if there's no alternative, then we see that somehow we can do the most amazing things. So we see that therefore, if we look at Vedic culture, there are so many ways that make people fixed. And that was the great goal. The difficulty in the material world is to not be fixed, is to be fickle. Fickleness, it is very difficult, because the material world is made to be distracting. Not just distracting your eyes and distracting your senses, but distracting your convictions. Your convictions become distracted. So we see in all traditional cultures, a large part of the difficulty that we see in traditional cultures, what makes it uncomfortable, is because it is all try to help people come to the platform of becoming fixed and committed. You know? So commitment is very difficult, because especially in the modern world, the heart is going in so many different directions. But when there is strong commitment, then it is very auspicious actually, even though it can be sometimes a little difficult and challenging. But commitment is very nice because it saves one, especially if one is fortunate enough that one's commitment is directed properly, if one has a proper recipient of one's commitment. And therefore Krishna explains that ultimately he is that proper recipient. If one's commitment can somehow be directed towards him. And therefore it is important to understand that Krishna is ultimately supreme. Because therefore he also says, Krishna says that those who are not understanding this yet and are somehow still investing their faith into many demigods, they will not be, their minds will still stay fickle, and they will be still influenced by all kinds of other desires. And we see it is very amazing how in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam we see how the sacrifice of Daksha was happening. And then we see how he invited all the demigods, and Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, they were there. And they were honored as being above everyone else, very extraordinary. And Lord Brahma, we see that, who was it? I think Bhaktivedanta was telling me the other day. Someone was saying how to understand the glories of Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva is also very important, because then it increases your understanding of the glories of Lord Krishna, isn't it? Because to understand how great these personalities are. But at the same time, Krishna is above them. And like we see that Lord Shiva, he is in a unique position. Even he himself, he is not a normal individual. He is not a living being like we are. as Prabhupada says, he is the via medium between the Lord and the living entities. So he himself is in a unique category, not just a powerful living being, but very close to the Supreme Lord. And we see even that in that 4th canto, what happened is there Daksha, he offended Lord Shiva because there was a great sacrificial assembly, and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma was there, they were seated, and Daksha entered in. And then everyone stood because Daksha was also a very powerful being. So everyone stood out of respect except Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Now Lord Brahma was fine because he is Prajapati, he is the original being within this world, he is the most powerful living being in this creation, so it's okay. But Lord Shiva, somehow Daksha, he didn't like Lord Shiva because Lord Shiva was also married to his daughter, to Daksha's daughter. So that was, he considered himself to be superior to Lord Shiva, even though Lord Shiva's ultimate position is, between him and Lord Brahma, they're the two most powerful beings. So therefore Daksha was very offended that Shiva didn't offer him proper respect, and then he cursed him, and he criticized him in front of the whole assembly. And then there was a whole fight that broke out between the followers of Lord Shiva and the Brahmanas, and they were counter-cursing one another. And it is very interesting to see the curses that was there. Because you see, Lord Shiva, he is unique because he is fully transcendental, and a great Vaishnava, but at the same time, he is also in charge of those who are in the modes of ignorance. He is in charge of the ghosts, the goblins, these lower beings, people who commit suicide, people who are very much deranged and crazy. He is the person because he is in control of the mode of ignorance. So he is the individual who is responsible for them. But in one sense, it is actually adding to his greatness, because it is very difficult to take responsibility for crazy people, for ghosts, for goblins. Very difficult, because these people have special needs that has to be met. So Lord Shiva, he is merciful towards even those who are greatly fallen. So that is actually, it's not denigrating his position, it's actually accentuating it. He is very merciful. But then we see there is the Brahmanas, who are the ones who are protecting the mode of goodness. So the orthodox individuals who are protecting society, protecting the mode of goodness, establishing the religious principles. So at that assembly, there was a fight that broke out between the followers of Lord Shiva and the Brahmanas, and they were cursing one another. And it's very interesting to see the curses. So because Lord Shiva was offended, he left. Shiva was offended. He himself was not disturbed, because he is a Vaishnava. He is Trinaropi Sunicchainam. He does not mind if people offend him. He left the assembly immediately when the curses was happening. But then his follower Nandishvar, he stood up and he cursed the Brahmanas. And he said, everyone here who heard this offense against Lord Shiva and did not retaliate, you will all be bereft, all you Brahmanas, you will be bereft of your transcendental knowledge, because you have now become addicted to the comfort and that comes with your elevated position in the world of goodness. But now you will be bereft of transcendental knowledge. You will become addicted to fruitive sacrifices and addicted to mundane religion. And then there was a great uproar. And then the Bhrigu Muni, one of the Brahmanas, then he cursed the followers of Lord Shiva, saying, you have no respect for the Veda, for the orthodox path, for the path of dharma, for the proper path of action established within this world, the proper way to act and respond. There is such a thing. The Lord has given us a proper way to live within this world. And you will be degraded, morally degraded. You followers, you will be addicted to bad substances and bad ways of acting and being. And in that way you will become unfit and disconnected from the proper path of action. So it is very interesting to see, because even we see that it continues up until this day. We have these two kinds of people. You have those that are into mundane religion, being proper, doing the right thing, but it is mundane. And then you have those that are transcendental, rebellious, and try to break free, and they are looking for something transcendental, but then they oftentimes become degraded because they disconnect from the support that comes from proper society. Yeah? And we see this pattern happens again and again. We see, for example, in even if you look when Prabhupada came to the West in the 1960s, then you had that whole eruption, the hippie era, which is so interesting. It was basically children from wealthy families, from wealthy parents, from nice cultured families that completely broke away from everything that their parents could give them. And they rebelled against what they saw to be mundane, materialistic values of just being nice and proper and wealthy and materially secure. And they broke away, and they were looking for something else, for something transcendental, something spiritual. But at the end, what happened to them? Most of them became drug addicts and loose sexual behavior because they lost contact with the support that comes from society. So it is interesting to see that this thing happens again and again in human society. We have this tension between civilization and then between those who become transcendental. But then we see in the sacrifice of Lord Daksha that at the end, how did it come together? What was the unifying principle? It is the devotees. The devotees. It is when Lord Vishnu himself appeared in that assembly that then there could be unity. Then everything could make sense. Because then one understands how everything fits together. That Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva is very dear to Lord Vishnu. And it is in fact, what ultimately happens at that sacrifice is complete chaos breaks out. Because Daksha had offended Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva was a great devotee, then severe reactions came. First, Sati, Lord Shiva's wife, she went to the assembly again, and when she was offended by her father, she left her body. She basically committed suicide in that assembly. And then Lord Shiva was very upset. Then he sent Virabhadra, his son. He created a big demon, and then he sent him there. And Virabhadra, he messed up the whole thing, to tell you the least. They destroyed the whole sacrifice, completely ruined it. And he also cut off Daksha's head, and then it was with the same knife, with the same tool that was used for the sacrificial animals in that assembly. So everything got completely ruined, destroyed. And it was explained that is the result. If you offend the transcendentalist due to mundane vision, you have to be very careful. Because sometimes transcendental personalities, they can be difficult for us to understand their behavior, just like Lord Shiva, fully transcendental person. But then because Daksha, out of envy and pride, he thought himself to be so elevated, even above Lord Shiva, then he was destroyed due to his offense, very badly so, completely ruined. So that also happens. But then at the end, the demigods, they then went to Lord Brahma, and they explained that what happened. And Lord Brahma said, you have to now ask for Shiva's forgiveness. So then they went to Lord Shiva, offered their obeisances, begged for forgiveness for their offense. And Lord Shiva then became very merciful because he is a devotee, ultimately. And then he went and they restored the sacrifice. Daksha's head, unfortunately, was burnt in the sacrifice. Virabhadra burned it because he threw it in the fire. So then they gave him the head of the goat. So Daksha's head was restored, but his pride was also broken. So that's what happened. He was rejuvenated, he got his new life again, but his pride was destroyed. But to make him humble, ultimately. So that's the other position that happens. And then they started the sacrifice again, and then we see a very fascinating thing. Then Lord Vishnu himself appears. So Lord Vishnu then appears, because everything was now properly in order. Lord Shiva is being worshipped properly, Lord Brahma was there, and then Lord Vishnu appeared in the sacrifice, which is the real goal. So that's to be remembered, that ultimately Krishna has to accept our sacrifice. So we can do so many things, perform this whole sacrifice, but if Krishna is not pleased by what we are doing, what is the point? And in the course of performing our sacrifices and our service, we offend the devotees. What is the point? Then there is no point in your sacrifice, because Krishna is not pleased. And if Krishna is not pleased, then you will not be getting any result of what you are doing. So, very subtle, these things. But then Lord Vishnu appeared, and then he explained to Daksha that Lord Shiva, he is like my second body. You have to understand that there is no difference between us. You cannot worship the one and not the other. You cannot make a distinction between us, in the sense that if to please me, you have to also please him. You have to worship him because he is my dear devotee. So in that way, we see that how everything comes together. And we see also the Hare Krishna movement is so interesting, because even if we looked in at the 60s, there was again the same thing that happens, the harmonizing factor. People that were transcendental, they were not interested in materialism, but at the same time they understood, if you want to transcend, and if you want to break free from material society, you have to then take shelter of the proper course of action, of what is given by the Lord. And therefore we find ourselves, the devotee, in such an interesting position. In one sense, he is part of the counterculture, because he is not into materialism and whatever, but at the same time, he is they're very straight. We're not using drugs, we're not basically engaging in sinful behavior. So Ravinder Sarupi says how the Hare Krishnas, he says, they became, this is what they became, the devotees, they dropped out, and then they became straighter than the straight. Yeah? Like you have these people that looks like hippies, but they actually live with stricter moral disciplines than their parents. Yeah? Like 4 negative principles, who does that? So that is the amazing thing with the devotees of Lord Vishnu, is that that's when 2 things come together, this transcendental urge and also then the understanding of proper culture that we find Brahmanical culture. And in the absence, that's what we see, in the absence of Krishna, in the absence of understanding Lord Krishna, then there can be no success. Then you will either become a materialistic Brahmana, concerned with the externals of religion and proper action, or you become just, if you're more into the transcendental kind of spirit, then you become someone who disconnects from material society, but then without purity or understanding, then you will still just become addicted then to other forms of sinful activity, like intoxication or illicit sex, and become a reject. So it is only by this connection with Krishna that one can properly move forward in spiritual life. And that's what we see also now in the Bhagavatam, how many these devotees that are then devotees of Krishna, and how unique they are in their understanding of life and in the challenges that life throws at them. And throughout the Bhagavatam we will see many different pastimes that bring out these different tensions that exist, to understand how things have to be balanced. Because in spiritual life, things have to be balanced out. The different forces and different decisions that we have to make. And through deeply absorbing ourselves in these pastimes of the Bhagavatam, then we also will be able, in our own life, to be able to properly make decisions that will please Krishna, ultimately, as we try to balance out these various factors in our services. Okay, let us hear if there are any questions or any comments, anything that has been said today. Okay, Jagadhatri, nothing today. Grantaraj Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki Jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki Jai, Gaura Premanande.
Is Dāsa Vilāsa Prabhu ki Jai.